Welcome to the worship services of the First Missionary Baptist Church in Huntsville. We're striving to become one of the most loving churches in all the world. Please join us now for a portion of our worship service.
And so these presidents and governors went to King Darius and asked him to sign an irrevocable ordinance. And the ordinance said, they had written it out, you see. King, you don't have to worry about spending your mental energy writing. We've already done it for you. Here it is. The decree says, anyone for the next 30 days who worships anybody, any god except you, O king, shall be thrown into the den of lions. Look at King Darius. Pride and vanity took over his mind, played a game with his whole mental processes. Darius probably said to himself, you know, that's a good idea. Worship me for 30 days. You know, that could be good for my kingdom. That could further stabilize and solidify my kingdom because it stretches to the end of the world of my day. Thank you, fellas. Good idea. And in his vanity and pride, he signed that decree, which was an irrevocable decree. Once it was signed and the king's signet ring had put its stamp on it, not even the king could change it. Now these jealous and envious cabinet members, presidents, governors, and others had what they want. We can now get this hated enemy, Daniel, killed, because ultimately that's what they wanted. Anytime you say put them in the lion's den, you want them dead. So, if we catch him praying, we've got him. He can be thrown to hungry and ferocious lions. Let's observe next Daniel's response to their conspiracy. If you had been Daniel and your friends, and they weren't friends, your colleagues had conspired against you and got the king to set up this trap for you, and you heard about the trap and you discovered that the trap was set for you, and if you walked into it, you were going to get your head bitten off by ferocious, hungry lions. What would you have done? Would you have gone in hiding? Would you have counteracted with trickery greater than that trickery? I know one person who said, if you beat me down, I'm going to beat you down 10 times more. I know his name, but I won't call his name. I won't even call his title. A lawyer taught him that. Yeah, I thought I'd tell you some more. What would you do? Would you have chewed out King Darius? Saying, stupid, naive, vain king, could not you have seen through their plot? Why did you sign that decree? Have I not been loyal to you? Have I not helped you? Because I've kept you from having losses. Did you read that in the text? These Negroes been stealing from you. I straightened out the books so that there's no damage, there's no losses. I've made you money. The stock market has gone up because of my work for you. what you've done. Your conspirators had left you in the predicament where Daniel was left. Well, what did Daniel do? What was his response? His response is this. He simply did what he'd always been doing. That's it. He simply did what he had always been doing. He kept company with God.
That's right. Yes, sir.
He just kept on talking with God. When they told him the decree had been signed, anybody is caught worshiping any god except King Darius for 30 days, that person would be fed to the lions. Well, Daniel went home. He knew the decree, knew the king had signed it. Went home, up in his upper room. Went home. Bible said upper chamber. New translation says upper room. Opened the window toward Jerusalem, because that's where the temple was, back in Jerusalem.
That's right.
And in that temple, God was supposed to have been invisibly enthroned. Opened the window toward Jerusalem. Got down on his knees. Window open, curtains pulled back. And talked to God 3 times that day. And 3 times every day. They caught him on his knees. They caught him consistently and loyally praying to his God. In the midst of conspiracy, he, like Jesus, did what he'd always been doing. He went to his upper chamber and talked with God. When Jesus faced the Calvary conspiracy, he went to his upper room. One of his upper rooms, and primary upper room, was in Gethsemane.
That's right.
He went to Gethsemane and said, Lord, I understand this cup that you want me to drink is going to be bitter. I don't want to drink it. But Lord, nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. And then when he had gotten to the cross, and the conspirators had already hung him, they had driven the nails through his hands and the nails through his feet. They had put the crown of thorns on his head, and blood was dripping down his face. Blood was dripping and even running out of his hands and out of his feet. Later on, when they stuck the sword in his side, blood came out of his side. But he was heard doing what he always did, talking with God. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So Daniel, knowing his life was in danger, went to his upper room. Why, Daniel, did you go to your upper room? I went to my upper room because in the upper room, talking with God, God will help you to handle all of your lower rooms. If you want poise and power and strength for your lower rooms, keep going to the upper room.
Preach, Reverend. Preach. All right. Yes, sir.
Do you have an upper room? You heard me tell this story before. I shared in this context today. Some people were touring London, England many years ago, and they visited the house where the Wesleys used to live. John and Charles Wesley and their dad and mother. And when they were touring the house, the guide showed them downstairs and then took them upstairs. And one inquisitive visitor was looking at everything upstairs and happened to notice that there's a well-worn spot in the floor. And the inquisitive visitor asked the guide, tourist guide, why is that floor like that? Why is this well-worn spot in the floor? And the tourist guide said, that's where John used to go pray. That was his upper room. Do you have an upper room? Where is your upper room? I tell you where my upper room is. It's in my living room, away from the rest of the rooms, where it's quiet. Nobody much comes in the living room. So I made the living room my upper room. Very seldom does Josephine come in the living room. Very seldom do I go in the living room, except when I'm going in the morning in my upper room. Sometimes my bedroom is my upper room. When I wake up in the morning, I turn the bed into an upper room. I just lie there and talk to God. Josephine is sleeping on the left side, and I'm talking to God on the right side. It's my upper room. Sometimes my upper room is in my car. God and I alone in the upper room. Where is your upper room? If you got an upper room, God will bless you to handle the lower rooms in your life. You remember when Russell Bailey was here? Russell didn't create this, but he made it plain. And he made it one of his signal mantras. He used to say, little prayer, little power. Much prayer, much power. No prayer, no power. And he was right. Whoever came up with that idea was right. The more you sincerely pray, the more power we'll have. The less we pray, the less power we'll have. Let me also remind you of another fact, and that is that nobody can keep us from praying but us. Nobody can keep us from praying but us. I remember a few years ago in one of our metropolitan cities, they passed a law, and the law said that there will be no more public prayer before football games. And the papers picked it up, and folk got all nervous and upset. And man, that was the buzzing thing going. They were talking about they're taking prayer away from us everywhere. You know, they already said they're taking it out of the public schools. Now we can't even pray before our football game. I got two things to say about that before I get to the next point. One thing, in particular, I get to the real point. The problem with some of us is that football is our God in the first place. I don't know what you need to pray to God for before going to a football game when football is your God. I won't tell you which state is like that, and I won't tell you which school is like that, because a whole lot of them are like that. But my point is, nobody can stop us from praying but us. They can pass all the laws that they want to pass about not praying before a public football game, or not praying before this in public and not praying before that in public. Nobody can stop you from praying. You can pray before you get to the football game. You can pray while you're at the football game. You can pray on your way home from the football game, and you can pray when you get home, and you can pray that night before you go to bed. Nobody can stop you from praying but you. Don't find excuses talking about they're taking prayer out of the schools and they're taking prayer out of this. No, if you want to pray, pray. God doesn't have to have your prayers verbalized. Just whisper a prayer. Have you ever prayed one of these quick prayers? When you didn't open your mouth, but you just said in your heart, God help me. You in mighty trouble and you just said in your heart, God, I'm in your hands. Or God, you got this thing. He hears those kind of prayers also. Because he always hears sincere prayer.
Yes, sir.
Other aspect of that is that we need to realize that Daniel's prayer posture amounted to civil disobedience. Some of us don't believe in civil disobedience, but it's in the Bible. They passed this law. The king signed it. That's the head of the government, isn't it? The king signed it, put his signet ring, signal on it, insignia on it. But Daniel defied it, violated it, didn't obey it because he was dancing to higher music. He was following a higher bandmaster. He was walking by the cadence that Peter and John, who later walked by in the New Testament, when they told the authorities, we must obey God rather than man. When the laws of man are out of harmony with the laws of God, we must stand up for the laws of God, even if it means civil disobedience. That's why Martin King Jr. wouldn't allow the establishment to stop him from his march toward human dignity, human rights, and human equality for all men and all women and all boys and all girls, because it was God's law. God gave us freedom. Man doesn't give us freedom. Freedom comes from God. We must obey God rather than man. Christians in the New Testament understood that better than Christians today. Christians in the book of Revelation understood that civil disobedience was important. You remember in Revelation, book of Revelation, Caesar was in authority. Many of the Caesars, but Caesar was in authority. And during the days of John, who wrote Revelation, one of the Caesars had had a law passed that said that every citizen in the whole Roman Empire would come together every year, once a year, and they would stand in their particular capitals or wherever, and they would announce publicly, Caesar is Lord. Caesar is Lord. And the Christians said, no, we are not going to stand up publicly and say Caesar is Lord. They stood up publicly and they said, Jesus Kyrios. Jesus is Lord. Christos Kyrios. Christ is Lord. And when they said that, the Roman emperor said, we'll get you. And they started systematically persecuting Christians. They fed them to lions. They made sport out of them in the arenas. They murdered many of them. Some were shot at the stakes, but they kept on saying, Jesus is Lord. And when they kept on saying Jesus is Lord, one of the historians finally wrote that the blood of the martyrs became the seed of the church. They just kept dying and kept bleeding. And the more they died and the more they bled, the faster the church grew. I tell you, if that was called on for us today to make that kind of commitment, the church would dry up.
Yeah. You're right. You're right.
Let's not be too long. Finally, I ask, how did God respond to Daniel's loyalty and faith and to his conspirators? When Daniel was thrown in the lion's den, what did God do? Read your text carefully. And it's right there in verse 21 that I didn't read in the original reading of the word this morning. You know what it says? God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth. God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth. After King Darius had signed the ordinance, it was in effect. And the men had come and told him, we found Daniel. He was over there in his upper room, on his knees, window open, praying toward Jerusalem, calling on the name of his God Jehovah. We caught him in the act. King, you know what the law says, don't you? It's an irrevocable law. Can't be changed. King stayed up all night, sleepless, wrestling with himself, trying to find out a way to save Daniel. But he couldn't save him, not with his power. So that night, while the king was restless, irritated, trying to find out what to do to save Daniel, Daniel was cool, calm, and collected in the lion's den, probably sleeping beside the lions. And instead of the lions eating him, they were acting like little purring kittens, rubbing up against him. You know what I think? I think the hymnist had Daniel in mind when he wrote one day these words: be not dismayed, whatever betide, God will take care of you. Beneath his wings of love abide, God will take care of you. No matter what may be the test, lean, weary one, upon his breast. God will take care of you. God will take care of you through every day, all the way. He will, God will take care of you. Well, may I tell you that others in the New Testament knew that fact. Paul knew about it. When Paul came to the close of his life, they took him to Rome, and one of the emperors decided, I'm going to behead him. But before Paul was beheaded, here was his testimony. I fought a good fight. I finished my cause. I've kept the faith. I'm ready to be offered up. For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. Yes, there was another preacher in the New Testament time, came closer toward the end of the New Testament. His name was Polycarp. He was the bishop of Smyrna. One day they told Polycarp, Polycarp, if you don't deny Christ and stop leading all these folk to Christ, we're going to put you in the arena and going to burn you with fire. And Polycarp just kept on preaching, Jesus is Lord. Just kept on preaching, Jesus is my Savior. Just kept on preaching the good news of the gospel. And finally, they tell us that they took Polycarp and carried him to the arena. And they loved him, but they were going to kill him because he wouldn't obey the rules of the government. And when they got him in the arena, they begged him, Polycarp, please deny Christ. Go back on your word. Recant. But when they set the fire, because Polycarp wouldn't deny Christ, the flames began to rise. And as the flames rose, we heard old Polycarp speaking out for history's sake and our sake. And here's what he said: 86 long years have I known my Christ, and he's done me no wrong. How can I deny my Lord? And he went on and died in the fire, giving his testimony for Jesus Christ, standing up in the fire, dying as a martyr in his name. Well, I want to ask these Christians in the book of Revelation. I want to ask Paul, who wrote that letter before he was beheaded. I want to ask Polycarp, who died in the fire as a martyr. Tell me, brothers, tell me, sisters, how could you die like that? How could you stand on that kind of firm faith? They said, the reason we could do it, Julius, because we knew something that the world didn't know. We already knew that when this earthly house of this tabernacle is dissolved, we've got another building, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. We know our God is an able God. He'll do either three things. He'll take you around the lion's den. He'll save you in the lion's den. Or he'll let the lions eat you. But when they eat you, that's not the end. He's got another side. You'll meet him on the other side. On the other side, where the wicked shall cease from troubling, and the weary shall be at rest. All of the saints of the ages shall sit at his feet and be blessed. On the other side, where there's no more death, no more pain, no more sorrow, no more crying. Former things have passed away. Hey, 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 yes, I'm glad I know him. He's my Savior. He's my Lord. He can take care of me in life, in death, beyond death. I'm glad he's able.